This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Bentliff, and Karl Almond is back with us today. And Karl, we had such an interesting conversation last time about so many different things. And one of those things, we were kind of touching on the world of EOS. And ProCFO Partners is an EOS organization. That's something encouraged with the people that we work with. There's a reason for that. Let's dive into this a little bit. And specifically, I want to talk about goals, which there's some specific terminology and frameworks that EOS uses when it talks about goals. But really briefly, so that we have some context, introduce us to EOS, like the smallest Cliff Notes version. And then let's get into some of these things we want to talk about with rocks or goals.
Right, Chris. Thanks. It's good to be here today. EOS is really a combination of many different business systems that have evolved over many years. A gentleman by the name of Gino Winkman put together the concept into a package that's very easy for entrepreneurs to use. That's where EOS comes from, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And, that's really the Cliff Notes version of EOS.
So it's simple. Simple. It's a construct, and it gives you, framework is the right word, scaffolding around which to sort of run your organization, takes a lot of the guesswork out. So let's talk a little bit about, because you mentioned this in our last conversation, which was rocks. And I said, that's fascinating. Let's introduce our audience a little bit more to this concept of rocks. Because as EOS frames goals, there's some really specific and for me, tangible and useful and actionable sort of processes in that. So with a basic understanding of the entrepreneurial operating system as a thing that exists, what are rocks and how do we use them and why are they valuable?
When Gino constructed EOS, he built it really into 6 sections. One of those sections is called traction. And in traction, he created a concept for goal setting called rocks. It's rocks is really EOS speak for goals. It's helping you to define the 3 to 7 most important things that need to get done in the next 90 days. One of the things that EOS does a really good job on is helping you to discipline yourself to create a vision long-term, but then to bring that back down to an annual plan that is going to help you to grow your business rapidly. And then once we get to the annual, we dive down even farther and create what they call the 90-day world. So everything evolves around that 90-day framework.
Now, this is super useful to me because I love that you use the word discipline. This is something I find many small and mid-market organizations just lack that. We chase shiny objects. We are focused on something that seems super important right now, and then business or competitive or the climate, the dynamics just change, and we're suddenly off doing something else. And we forget about sort of the concept of maybe adjusting or restructuring versus let's go chase that new thing. So as we kind of get into this 3 to 7 sort of specific things, how do I target those things, or how do I define those things so that I am disciplined to them, so that they're not the thing that feels most important to me right now, but they're tied to my longer sort of sustainable strategy?
By starting with your annual plan, you're able to define the actions that are going to take you from where you are today to where you see yourself being in a year, but also in some respects, even further down the road than the 1-year plan. All of these actions build upon each other. So we take a snapshot and say, what is it that we really need to get done in the next 90 days to move us along to where we want to get to? Narrowing the vision to the 90 days keeps you focused. It doesn't allow you to get off on tangents because you've got a short enough goal window so that you can accomplish it. And The other thing is we keep it 3 to 7 goals or 3 to 7 rocks. We don't want to have a plethora of things because, like you commented, it becomes the shiny things. Too much, evolves into no activity, where this truly is less is more.
So we're going to reverse engineer success. We're going to start with a year or an annual plan or even longer, and we're going to break that down into, and I love this idea of sprints is kind of the framework that I think of. Talk to me a little bit about these 3 to 7, because that's like 2x. That's not a small number to me. I could have 3 or I could double that, which could mean double the work or could mean some of these feel less important. How do I prioritize these? Is it better to have 3? Is it better to have 7? I understand that's going to be different for every organization, but with that idea of discipline in mind, I guess how do I start with, like, these are our 20 goals, everybody, and now we're going to chisel them down to whatever? What's the process in that, or what do I need to start thinking about?
As part of that annual and quarterly EOS planning, we start with a very big list of things to do.
Yeah.
And it's really the L10, the leadership team, that takes that list and whittles it down. And you keep looking at it from a perspective of, is this something we can get done in the next 90 days? And how important is it to make that goal that we've set for ourselves? And naturally, the list gets cut down. And honestly, I've been in situations where we've only had 3 goals for that quarter because they were big goals. They were ambitious. They were going to take a lot of effort from the people on the leadership team to execute. The other aspect is that you do have a group of key stakeholders sitting on that leadership team. So it isn't going to be just one person that's going out to complete these. Those rocks are going to get distributed to the leadership team so that you've got kind of an all hands on deck approach to it. So where it looks like, there's 6 goals or 5 goals for the quarter, when you start distributing them to the leadership team, it may only be 1 goal per member. So it doesn't overwhelm. And part of it is that when you're selecting your goals for the quarter, you want to be sure that you're not laying it all on the finance guy or laying it all on the operations chief. You want to have the goals distributed so that you're getting equal weight or equal pull from everybody on the team.
So talk to me a little bit about that. Should I be intentional about that? So, okay, everybody, we've identified our sales goal. Let's not lay another one on that team, even though that's the engine that, that's theirs. Now let's move on to, like, do I think departmentally about this, or do I think these are the goals and now we got to figure out who's going to do it? Does that make sense? Do I figure out the team I have available and therefore let's let that inform the goals? Or do I say these are the goals and now I need to figure out the team available to do it?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
You take them both into account as you're going through your goals list, because, and honestly, it might be that 2 goals might be smaller, that they're not going to be as involved, and there may be 1 massive one. So you lay that one, like, grow revenue 10% in the next 90 days. That may be enough for the chief revenue officer to deal with, where it might be 2 smaller goals for the finance guy that maybe it's, reviewing a certain category of costs for potential improvement and, creating a new report set or something. So you got to measure the impact this is going to have from what you've got. And you said it right. You've got to look at your team, but you've also got to look at what's critical to get us to that next 90-day target.
Something I love about this is, and I say this often, is I think a hallmark of high performance is decisiveness. And I think that that's also something that can be very difficult for especially smaller organizations to be decisive. And so part of what you're sharing for me forces us to be decisive. You've mentioned the leadership team around me. Talk to me a little bit about the personality dynamics, and that gets a little bit into culture, and that's not the focus of our conversation today, but it does not serve me, correct, or do correct me. It does not serve me to have a whole ton of back and forth and hand wringing and paralysis by analysis and all this stuff. We need to get to the rocks. What are the rocks? And those shouldn't be a mystery because we've already got the annual plan. We're trying to fill this stuff in. But how important is that decisiveness or that ability for my team to act quickly with agility, to maneuver rather than, okay, let's keep thinking about this? Because honestly, we can think about this for 90 days and now that window is shot.
Right. Gino did a great job building in tools into EOS that help you move that process along. And there was actually a consultant that I was speaking to who does other types of management consulting, but has a term called Elmo. And she used to have an Elmo doll that she would bring to her meetings that she was facilitating. And I was just blown away. I'm like, Elmo, what are you talking about? What does this mean? She says, it means enough. Let's move on. So it's like having those tools, and EOS does provide that.
That's great.
But it's up to the facilitator of the meeting, whether it's an outside independent consultant or one of the management team, to raise his hand and say, we either need to make a decision on this, put it on the list, or defer it to the future. Maybe we need to wait till the next 90-day section and think about this one a little bit more, because we do want to employ, and we talked about this a lot in our last conversation, SMART is critical. Specific, measurable, achievable, time focused, and, those targets that we use to be able to get, all of the goals lined up properly. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So using those tools, a goal may not be attainable for this quarter. It may just not be physically possible to do it. Maybe we don't have the resources. Maybe it's not timely to do it right now.
I love it.
That process automatically takes care of eliminating things that you can't deal with. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just was going to say, I love that you brought back the SMART framework. We talked about the FAST framework last time too, but part of what I'm kind of hearing you say is when we talk about that, you mentioned earlier, like, be honest. Can you do this?
Right.
One of the questions on that is, do you have the right leadership team to pull this off? And so then that sort of forces you to back up into maybe one of your rocks at some point needs to be evaluating who are the people making these decisions so that we can move quickly. I think that I bring this up only because we can feel often as a leadership team, at least I've experienced this, we can feel like we're doing something productive just by getting in the room and talking about stuff. We can feel like, okay, well, we had the meeting. We didn't actually do anything. We didn't advance the thing, but we had the meeting that was on the calendar, and therefore we can check that off, and we felt like we were doing something. And part of what I think this idea of rocks, this 3 to 7, it has to do this, it has to connect in 90 days, it has to connect to, is it forces us out of that complacency, and it forces us to move forward with deliberation and with focus. And I think that I'm glad that you brought the SMART back up, because it is the framework inside the framework that helps us do that.
Right. I think one of the other things too is if your management team, if you've evolved the culture properly as EOS asks you to do it, you have an environment at that leadership team where you can literally talk about anything without fear of repercussion.
Yes.
That brutal honesty has to be there, because you will self-regulate. If something isn't appropriate, isn't the right time, if somebody's not pulling their weight, somebody else on the team has to be able to raise their hand and say, accountability says we need to do this. Why are we not accomplishing it?
What are the sub points inside of the rock? So that's a 90-day kind of window. What are my checkpoints along the way? Is it something where every week or every meeting or once a month we're checking on our 3-month progress? Or how do I know that I'm doing okay? And how do I use what I know to either help me address the friction that's happening in the rock that maybe will make me say we need to reevaluate this? Or because again, I want to avoid the goal became a 3-month thing, but we realized when we got into it that we needed to extend it to be a 6 or a 9-month. Would you agree that means we picked the wrong goal? That needs to be tied to something else? Or just talk to me a little bit about that whole situation.
I recently read that there is an EOS implementer that actually has his teams do what he calls hardening the rocks. And it's a process after the rock is assigned that between the time of the quarterly or annual meeting and the next weekly L10 meeting, keeping in mind that every week our leadership team is meeting.
That's what you mean by L10 is the leadership team. Yep.
And part of that process is a rock review every week, but it's a specific check-in. It's, am I on track? Am I off track? Or is it done? And it's up to the integrator to step back if somebody is continually saying off track, off track, off. That isn't something you deal with in that point in the meeting, but you can identify an issue and bring it up during your IDS phase of your EOS meeting to say there's a problem. It's also up to the person who owns that rock to raise their hand if they don't think it's specific enough. If they need clarity from the management team, is it achievable? And like you had mentioned, maybe we need to recast the rock. Maybe we need to change what the goal is. Maybe we need to push it off to a future period. But it's being honest with yourself. Have I got the resources? Have I got the whatever it is I might need to accomplish that rock? Do I have the support of the management team? Is the leadership team actually supporting my execution of this thing? If not, bring it back. Let's talk about it. But don't wait until the end of the quarter. During that weekly check-in, that should be part of the discussion. The other thing that I always do with my rocks is I break them into milestones. And what the milestones do is it sets more defined, shorter-term goals for specific pieces that make up that rock. I like to think about taking the rock and breaking it into pebbles.
Yes, I love it.
What are the pieces of it that are even below that rock that need to get done to make that happen? It may be as simple as making a phone call to a supplier to check on availability or something. Or, talking to another leadership team member because I need their help coordinating something.
I think you're speaking to the value of having somebody on the team or that outside consultant, that EOS kind of expert who can help you shorten the learning curve so that you're not spending your first year fumbling around the concept of rocks and realizing that you had it wrong, or that what you thought was going to be a 3-month thing turned into a 9-month thing because you had the wrong this or that. So I think there's a lot of value in having a person on the team or that outside force who can help you steer clear of the obstacles. I was going to say of the bumps in the road, the rocks in the road, but the obstacles that can slow you down and kind of trip you up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And having an organization like ProCFOs that's aware of EOS and practices it and has people on the team that are EOS people, it helps companies to leverage and move forward. I'm never going to be the implementer. I have been an integrator, but that isn't what I'm there to do. But I'm there to support that journey and that mission. And being aware and being able to talk and walk the walk, it helps a lot for the company.
Karl Almond is one of the experts over here at ProCFO Partners. Such a great conversation around. I like the specificity of EOS and rocks, but really a little bit thinking just kind of generally around how are you approaching your goals and how are you approaching your strategies and the tactics required to reach those strategies. I think this has been a really healthy conversation. And as always, I'm looking forward to the next one. You're always saying something that sparks my mind and makes me think, we should have a conversation about this or that. So thank you, Karl. It's good to be with you today.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.